So I'm going to attempt to do a quick, as I can, rig rundown for my looping station, which would include guitar, which is what this board is for, bass, which is what that board is for, and then drums, which I use the Alesis Nitro with the mesh heads. And I have for outputs, which I'll explain in the chain later, the drums and the microphone both have their own output that go to that PA speaker. And then I have the option for bass and guitar to either loop through the bass amp or I can play through the guitar amp. So I'll explain a little bit more of that in a minute. But the bass signal comes in through the wah, goes through this board, tuner, octave divider, which has a cool organ sound, BigMuff for fuzz, the Microtubes kind of for EQing, but mostly for the distortion, and then a delay, which I use sometimes. I do use 2 sets of wireless, so when I'm switching between bass and guitar, I don't get any chords wrapped up in each other. And I also have the option of, if I want the bass and the guitar to both run through the same input, I can use one as a receiver and then 2 transmitters and just switch the channel on that by hitting a button on the back. And I can quickly go between bass and guitar through the guitar board. So a guitar board can get complicated because it's not necessarily set in order that the pedals go in, and I'll explain. The first pedal that you see in the most recent that I added, this disaster area, basically is just a MIDI controller. I know a little bit about MIDI from doing a little bit of recording and using keyboards, but what this is, I have this set up to do is I have an A device and a B device, and each one has its stored presets, and I have the Meris Enzo synth pedal set up as device A, I believe, and then I have the collider, which is a delay reverb in one, set up as my B device, and then I can save presets for either one of those on here and switch through them pretty easily. Also, this is an expression or volume pedal. I have it set up for expression running through this, so it'll send an expression signal to either one of these, and mostly obviously I use it for the synth. I wish I had room for another one to use for volume, but that's awesome additive. But the signal actually starts for the bass or for the guitar in the TC Helcon, which also the microphone is ran through that as well. I can get 2 stacks of vocal harmonies on top of that, and it also has a few built-in delay and reverb effects, which sound pretty good with the cajon. So it also has a guitar input so that it can read the guitar key and harmonize accordingly. So then the guitar comes out into the tuner, comes down into the wah, and then from there, I believe it goes to the octave divider, then back down here to this. I have basically two overdrive pedals. I may change one of them out for some heavier distortion, but Brad Paisley is super sweet. Ice 9 is pretty nice as well. That's the Joe Satriani. So it runs through both of those. And I can stack them or use them individually. I have one kind of set up for super, a little bit more high gain, which surprisingly this one sounds the best with the super high gain. And then one of them set up kind of as a boost. Then the Meris Enzo, I could do a video for like 12 hours and still not explain all the things that does. I guess I'll try to get a little closer on that one. But basically, it turns your guitar into a synth. The, what do they call it? The tracking, I guess you'd call it, is not that bad, which some synth guitar pedals can be outrageous. So then the signal, I believe, goes out of there into the reverb delay. And again, I could spend all day explaining this, but basically one side is delay, the other side is reverb. And you have all of these options here, if you can see it, for each one Then the signal goes out of that and into one of these ABY switchers. So the bass would come out of that and go into one of these, and then the guitar would run through all these pedals and come into this as well. And then the output from that, this is going to get confusing, is going to go into another ABY, so that I can switch this signal of guitar or bass to output to either the guitar amp or the bass amp. So if I wanted to, I could have the guitar loop playing out of the bass amp and the bass loop playing out of the bass amp. Then I could switch over to the guitar amp at a different loop, or just play directly, you know, my soloing or my leads would be played directly to this. That way the sounds don't get all muddy. You can keep them separate. So when you're doing improv, it only comes out of the one amp. So then it comes out of that last switcher pedal and goes into one of the inputs in the Boomerang looper. So the looper is set up in kind of a dual mono, to where I have bass guitar coming into one side, and then I have microphone and drums into the other side. So they are both always recording. So you got to keep that in mind when you have the microphone or a guitar. You got to make sure that you mute when you're not playing one of your instruments, and you use the switchers to switch between them. Now I have another switcher up here. If you didn't see that, it does the same thing. It just looks different. It's bigger. Somebody's letting me borrow it to do this. And the microphone signal comes into this and then out. And in order to, you know, turn it from TRS balanced into more of a high Z, I guess, you use this little imp, and it turns it from microphone to 1/4 inch. So now my mic signal is, you know, in 1/4 inch form, and I can switch between microphone and drums, or I can just leave both of them on at the same time. So I can record from the microphone and the drums at the same time if I wanted to. So both of those, microphone and drums, go into their own input. And then, like I said, I have 2 separate outputs. So to get a little bit more in depth with the Boomerang looper, it doesn't save loops. So it's really only good for live performances, on the fly, recording, practicing, stuff like that. You can't really pre-save loops and kind of go do a show like that. Some people like to do that. I prefer to come up with all my ideas on the spot. And you can have 3 separate loops. It has a couple different modes, but I only use it for the mode where each one of these is its own loop and plays individually. You can, if you start with this loop, it does a cool thing where this loop sets the time for the length of all the other loops. So I would record this and it would always play. So you could do a simple hi-hat or tempo, something to keep your tempo, and get that loop going, and then you can stack these other 2 on top of it while this one always plays. Or if you start from the other end and you start your looping over here, each one of these will be its own separate loop. Some of the features that I use as the bonus features for the yellow and green knobs is stack. Obviously, you have to be able to stack multiple things on one loop. So this loop could have, you know, 100 stacks on it, which would be insane. But usually I'll have a couple vocal parts, a bass part, maybe 1 or 2 guitar parts, and they'll all be looping through this with the drums at the same time. Then what else do I use it for? Erase is obviously a very important function. You have to be able to, if you don't like something that you just did, you can erase it. I've used the fade in, fade out, which is good, but lately I've been actually using the copy and paste, so I can make a loop to start with, and then I can copy that loop to the next one if I want to add to it, but keep what I originally made. That way I don't have to sit here and create 2 full separate loops, because I'm doing it live. So it can get kind of long, like this video is getting. So instead of doing that, I can start with a pretty cool, simple something and copy it to here, add to it, and even if I wanted to copy it to here and add to it again. So that way I could revert back to the quieter, less, and then more and more. It's typically how I've been doing it. I think that's really that's really it. For bass, I have this Ibanez with the Bartolone pickups. Plays really nice. And then guitar, I'm just using this American-made Fender Strat Beauty. The Vox AC30. There's an amp, yeah.